Sunday Surefire podcast. I'm your host, the Commish. Joining me today is the co-host, Ethan Weaver.
Kamish, how we doing?
We are doing pretty well, Ethan. Doing pretty well. Joining us today is not Aaron Downtown Brown as usual, but we do have a very special guest joining us today. It is the one and only Wyatt Bertolone of JWB Fantasy Football. Wyatt is also a contributor at Dynasty League Football, and his rankings help contribute to Fantasy Pros Expert Consensus Rankings. You can check him out on X at WyattB_FF and on YouTube at JWB Fantasy Football. Wyatt, what's going on, my man?
Nothing, man. Feeling good being here. I love the introduction. Happy to talk some ball with you guys.
Well, we're really happy to have you on here, Wyatt. I appreciate you carving out the time. It's always a good day here on the podcast so we can get one of the best analysts in the industry and one of the best beards in the industry on the episode
right to my heart.
At the same time.
If there's one way to get right to my heart, it's to compliment the beard.
Well, you can tell you've been putting in the work on the fantasy front. You've definitely been putting in the work on the beard front. Ethan's got some work to do to get there. I definitely have some work to do to get there. Fortunately, my fantasy takes are usually better than my beard game. It's definitely not my strongest suit, but I do what I can on both fronts. But we're here today, folks, to run down the AFC North for you. Wyatt's a perfect guy to do this with because he is a fan of one of the teams in the AFC North. Unfortunately for him, it happens to be the Cleveland Browns. We were chopping it up before he came on here. He's a long-time suffering Browns fan, but I think there's a glimmer of hope for him this year on the Browns. But we're talking fantasy here, so we're going to be sticking to studs, the high-profile names that you know, the guys that are in the top 25 or so in ADP. We'll be talking those guys. We'll be hitting on sleepers. Everyone knows what a sleeper is at this point. A guy that's a little bit undervalued is going to outperform his position on the board. And give you some good fantasy value there. We're talking busts, players that are the opposite, will not live up to their higher draft costs. And for the dynasty folks out there, we're going to be touching on some sleepers, guys on that format. You can get on your roster on the cheap, players that you maybe mine for a year or two on your bench, and hopefully they pan out. So we're going to be diving into all of that. But before we do that, Wyatt, just give me a quick rundown of what you got going on at JWB or Fantasy Pros, DLF, whatever the case may be. Tell us what you're about. Tell our audience what you're about and where you're at in the industry right now.
Sure. First off, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about my work on your show. But so I'm the co-owner of JWB Fantasy Football, and we are kind of an all-encompassing fantasy brand. We talk best ball, dynasty, redraft, devy. We've got a little bit of everything for everybody. And one of the things that we try to really cultivate is a community. We've got a really cool Discord that's free. That's almost 900 members strong now. And that was really important to us, is building that community through the Discord of people who all just friendly, loving, want to talk fantasy football and try and get better. And that's been super cool to help build that. And over at DLF, I do my writing there. I don't think I'm a very good writer, but they were so kind to let me do some writing for them. So it's been cool. It's a cool challenge over there. But right now I have a weekly series that comes out every Wednesday. That's a positional buy, sell, hold article that, each week it's a different position, pick 4 players, tell you what I'm trying to do with them in Dynasty. And doing the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings. So helping contribute there, which is super cool to try and track how you're doing each and every year. It's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah, definitely. And I've read some of Garrett's work personally on DLF. Ethan and I have both been members there in the past, and I still am currently. So it really is great work that Wyatt cranks out there, folks. Make sure if you're on DLF that you're giving that a shot. And if you're not on DLF and you're playing Dynasty, you're missing out on some really good content. And the forum is really good on there too. They're a really good network of people that you can get in touch with through that site as well. And remember, Wyatt is a contributor to the Expert Consensus Rankings, or ECR, at Fantasy Pros as well. So if there's anything that you hate about the ECR, make sure you take that up with Wyatt directly.
Yeah, I get those calls.
He's solely responsible for everything that you don't like on Fantasy Pros. So keep that in mind. But speaking of Fantasy Pros, for this exercise, we're going to be utilizing for our studs, sleepers, and our busts. We're using Fantasy Pros data for this. We're going to be going with the 1 QB, half PPR, average draft position, or ADP. And we're going to be using that for those categories. When we get to our dynasty stash candidates, we're going to be using Fantasy Pros as well. But this is going to be their dynasty and keeper rankings to sort of give you an idea of where those guys are going in drafts and where they rank at their respective positions. So that's enough pleasantries, enough formalities. Let's dive into the meat of the episode here in the rugged AFC North. We're starting with the studs, guys. We're going to go with the highest ranked player in this division in 1 QB. That is none other than Jamar Chase. His ADP is number 4 overall, good for WR3. Wyatt, you're a guest. We'll throw the ball right to you, brother. Are you in or out on Jamar Chase at number 4 overall, and why?
Hard to be out on a player like Jamar Chase. And for that reason, I am basically just in at cost. I mean, like that's where he goes on like underdog too. I do a lot of best ball drafts there. And the way I kind of feel about like these wide receivers in this general range is if you're doing one draft, you kind of have to pick who you like the most out of the tier because it is kind of the tier, right? You got CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. I'm gonna say Brad. Like everyone's gonna have their favorite out of those bunch. And if you're just doing your one draft, you just have a couple home leagues or whatever, you kind of have to parse through which one you think is best because you might only have a chance at one of them. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with Jamar Chase. I think there's actually a reason to believe that he could finally have like his best season since when he was a rookie, because without Tyler Boyd, I think they could move him in the slot more than they have previously. And that could end up being, more targets, more receptions, all those things. And he's really dynamic with the ball in his hands. So it's very possible that things can click back into place for the Bengals this year. Joe Burrow, hopefully back and healthy. I mean, he had that thing with the wrist that's like no quarterback ever has had this injury in the wrist. Like it's all like linemen and stuff. So it was super weird, but he's cleared for contact going into training camp. So everything should be good there. And if we get, the Joe Burrow we're used to, Jamar Chase could go out and do everything he's been doing. But I was going to note, like I said, if you're only in a couple drafts, I say, you kind of have to take your pick here. But if you're going in a bunch of drafts, I honestly like kind of splitting up my exposure a little bit to all these guys in this area because I think they're all fantastic that I don't want to miss out on any of them. And it's hard to like stake your claim on one over the other too much. I think the only like the big take you can really have at this point is like, maybe we're overthinking things with Justin Jefferson and like he's still the best wide receiver in football. But I have no issue Jamar Chase being over Justin Jefferson. It's the way I have it currently anyways, just because I think the touchdown equity is much higher for Chase than it is Jefferson currently.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs here in round 1 for sure. I mean, it's tough to make an argument against Chase. I think everyone would love to have Jamar Chase. Ethan, would you agree with that? And where are you at on Chase at current cost?
I mean, at cost, I would, if I'm going receiver in the top 5, I mean, Chase, there's really no better pick you can go with than Jamar Chase, just with Joe Burrow at quarterback. He's been absolutely crushing in red zone targets. I think you see Chase over Jefferson just because of the uncertainty that you see in Minnesota right now. Reports are that JJ McCarthy's the QB3 right now on the team, so looks like Darnold is gonna take the reins to start, which is why I think Jefferson below Chase, Hill, and Lamb makes a lot of sense. But the way I like to build my redraft teams, and as Wyatt said, it kind of depends how many leagues you're in, but I think at 4, seeing Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson ranked at 6th and 7th, I think I would rather take the stab at the running back in this range and then hammer a receiver after, which is why that would be the only reason why I'd be quote unquote out on Chase. But you never really out on Chase because he's just a dominant receiver. And I do think he has a chance to absolutely blow up with a healthy Joe Burrow. As Wyatt said, Boyd's out of there now. Potential slot targets, potential increase in targets. But if I'm going to be drafting here at the 104, I would rather go in a different direction, Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson.
I'm on board with that too, Ethan. That's more or less where I'm at. So if I really have to click the button on him at ADP 4 overall, I'm going to be out for that reason. And I don't disagree with anything anyone else has said. Chase could go nuts. Hell, he could be the number 1 scoring player among the non-QBs this year. That wouldn't shock me. But if I really have to kind of go through with the fine-tooth comb, I'm also on board with the running backs here. That's because when I build my redraft teams, my ideal setup is to go hero running back strategy, which essentially, for those who don't know, entails you grab a running back with your first, maybe your second pick, and then everything else for the next handful of rounds is all receivers, tight ends, maybe an elite quarterback too. So I typically like to grab my stud running back. If I'm drafting in the top 4, I'm not going to miss my chance to grab one of the guys Ethan mentioned, McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. Those guys, you can call me a fossil for this, anybody out there, but I actually have those guys 1, 2, and 3 in my redraft rankings this year, but just for that reason. I don't want to miss the boat on those guys, even though I love the wide receivers too. So that's where I'm at on Chase. If I really have to split those hairs, I'm going to be out on them at ADP number 4 overall here. Wyatt, any reactions to Chase before we move on to our next guy?
Well, I like the point about the running backs because it is really exciting with Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson this year. And I think there is a tier gap after those two, right down to the next running backs. Like I'm still excited for Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, but like there's a clear gap between those players to me, right? And I think the league that you're in really helps inform your decision in the beginning of the round like that. Like if you're in the 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, like running back becomes more important there. And it really makes a lot of sense to go with Bijan or Breece Hall. If you're in 3 wide receiver, 2 flex, like the running backs start to become a little bit less important. Like it starts to, I think, sway back to, maybe drafting wide receiver, but they are extremely close. And like, I'm a 0 RB zealot. I follow it through and through. So it's tough for me to like say take the running back in the first round, but like it does make a lot of sense because we know that like the biggest fantasy performances you can get the first round actually come from those running backs, right? Like that's when we see CMCs happen, like you had CMC, you probably made your playoffs. Like that's just how it is, like, and that's what you get when you hit on those first round running backs. They just have a little bit more risk compared to the wide receivers, right? Which is why I kind of go with the 0 RB route. But it does like it, you could just like win the lottery with like Bijan or Breece Hall. Like very easily, we can see the path for either of them to have the CMC type of year. So I can't hate it on it all.
Yeah, definitely some good points there. And you made a great point when you talk about knowing your league and how important that is, and the format of your league as well. If you're starting 3 receivers or you're starting multiple flex spots, maybe it is the move to go with the wide receiver position. You guys out there know your leagues far better than we ever will, so always keep that in mind when you're getting any type of analysis from anyone in the industry. But let's keep the analysis rolling here, fellas. Let's go to Derrick Henry here. He's going ADP 25 overall, good for RB10. Ethan, tell me where you're at on Henry and if you're in or out at this price point.
As I said, if I am going running back in round 1, I do like to hit receiver pretty heavy after that. But just looking at it, everything holistically, I don't think the 301 is a bad price to pay for Derrick Henry, who we could see have 15 plus touchdowns easily this year, which I predict he will have over 15 touchdowns. Gus Edwards last year had 13, which was 4 in the league. But I just think you just have a lot of upside with Derrick Henry at the 301. I mean, he's going to be playing a much more efficient offense. Lamar Jackson back there. Yeah, Lamar Jackson's going to steal some carries, maybe steal some stuff around the goal line, but it's also a player that defenses have to react to, which Derrick Henry may see increased running lanes that he wasn't used to seeing in Tennessee. So I'm very excited for Derrick Henry this year, and I do think he has a chance to have a monster season. He did have his lowest yards per rushing attempt, 4.2 of his career, and then also his lowest yards after contact per attempt, which is 3.32 since taking over as a full-time starter in the league. But he is turning 31 this year. So, I mean, you do have the risk of, hey, is the cliff coming for Derrick Henry? I mean, Derrick Henry is like the superhuman running back. I mean, but at some point, Father Time always wins. So is this going to be the year, or is he going to be a bell cow RB1 on a very efficient offense?
Wyatt, are you taking a stab at the superhuman that is Derrick Henry at this price point?
I haven't been a lot. I like the positional ADP he has, RB10. I think that's right. The overall ADP is where I struggle. He's at a point in which I think that the wide receivers start to fall off to a point where I want to make sure I'm taking one there, and that's why I just end up not drafting a lot of Derrick Henry. It is scary though because he is Derrick Henry. He's an absolute animal, going to possibly the best offensive system and surroundings he's ever been in. Despite him being, advanced age for a running back, I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually matter for him. Like it would not. If Derrick Henry's playing at 35, like is anyone going to be surprised? I don't think we should be.
No way.
He's an absolute animal. So it's scary to pass on him. So it's really just a structure thing for me. Like I got no problem against Derrick Henry. It's just the way my drafts have been going. I don't find myself drafting him very often. Now, like let's say you draft 2nd overall, whatever, you take CeeDee Lamb, you take another wide receiver on the way back, and 3rd round Derrick Henry's there. Now we're looking pretty with that pick right there. I think that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I hear you on that too. And usually I'm a guy who I start to fade. I almost treat it like Dynasty where I fade guys that are really aging, guys who have really, really high mileage on them. And Henry kind of checks both boxes. I think he'll be 30 for the entirety of this season. He's also got over 2,300 career touches if you count regular season and playoffs. So I usually fade those things, but I actually find myself being in on him here at this price point. I just don't think he's at a point where a lot of other guys, when they get to this type of workload on them, start to fall off. I mean, last year, despite running behind Pro Football Focus's 32nd, so dead last ranked offensive line, he was still top 10 among running backs in evaded tackles, breakaway run rate, rushing yards per game, and total touchdowns. So like he still did it. Like the signs of him wearing down aren't quite there yet. We know he can handle a big workload. And stepping into Baltimore, I mean, Ethan mentioned they wanted to pound the rock. In fact, last year they were number 1 in rushing attempts, number 1 in rushing yards, and number 3 as a team in yards per carry. Totally get that Lamar Jackson factors into that too and plays a role. So I'm just not as worried about Lamar stealing everything. I actually think with Henry back there, they're more inclined to give him more of the workload and take some of that off Lamar, who suffered with injuries in the past sometimes when he takes on too much here. Ethan, we'll let you put the ball on this one, my man. Are you at all worried about Henry's past at all catching up to him, or are you kind of just using that track record as a reason to justify taking a shot on him here at the 2-3 turn?
I think his track record justifies taking him here. And that's why I said, especially if you're going receiver, and he's your RB1 in the 3rd round. I just saw something that came out that Derrick Henry spends like $250,000 on his body every single year. So this guy is maybe play till 40. You never know. But Derrick Henry is clearly motivated, I think, and to be playing in an offense like Baltimore. I think that they obviously have Super Bowl aspirations. So Derrick Henry, I think we're going to see a big year from him if he does stay healthy. So I'm not too concerned about Derrick Henry right now.
Yeah, the last athlete I heard talking about spending that much money on their body was LeBron James from years past, and Wyatt shaking his head and smiling because he's a Cleveland fan, and that's their lone championship they took home. So hey, if Henry can age like LeBron, us as fantasy managers are going to be pretty damn happy about that. Why wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I guess go buy Derrick Henry in Dynasty for that reason alone.
There you go. Yeah, we'll chop that up just that one line, put that out there. See what the Dynasty community thinks about that.
There you go.
That's funny. But hey, we just brought up Lamar Jackson. He's our last stud we're going to talk about. We give a little bit more leeway on studs at the quarterback position when we talk a 1 QB format. So Lamar does crack the top 50, ADP 41 overall. Good for QB 4 on this list, Wyatt. I know it's a division rival and he's a quarterback on another team, but are you taking a stab at him here at that cost?
Definitely. I think he's right in that tier with Hurts and Josh Allen, and you can argue Patrick Mahomes is in there. I think we're going to see bounce back from Patrick Mahomes after last year. That's probably not a hot take to say. But yeah, I mean, Lamar, I think is, if you don't account for his terrible immune system, I think he's one of like the safest QBs there is in fantasy because of that rushing floor. He's an efficient passer. The second year in Todd Monken's offense, I think they could take another step forward. And we saw him pass more last year than he ever did before, and still got the rushing that we need from him. I think like he can continue to just be right there at the top of the standings for QBs and scoring, 20 to 24 fantasy points per game. Shouldn't be a surprise for him. So I'm definitely at this price. It doesn't hurt that like I really love like drafting Mark Andrews too, because I think his cost is really good. People seem to have slept on Mark Andrews a bit, I think, there. So I like pairing them up. So definitely in on Lamar.
Ethan, do you agree?
I agree completely. Lamar Jackson is just a game changer, especially in 4 points per passing touchdown leagues. I usually like to wait on quarterback, but if Lamar Jackson is sitting there in the middle of the 4th round, it's hard not to press the draft button. He just gives you that immense positional advantage, in my opinion. And Mark Andrews was hurt last year, and Lamar Jackson still performed. A healthy Mark Andrews coming back, I do think that's going to push things even higher for Lamar Jackson. I just think he's a game changer at the position, and I'm definitely happy to take him in the middle of the 4th.
I think it's a really good spot for him. It's if he does really went to redraft for season, gets into full tilt. If he's there in round 4 for you, I think it's going to be hard not to pass on him. It's just like at my core, it's just hard for me to click the button on a quarterback in the 4th round. And I just like too many other guys that are on the board there. Like League Neighbors goes 1 pick later. Trey McBride goes in that range. Mark Andrews, who I just brought up, I freaking love this year. He might be my favorite 4th round value in drafts this year. Like an elite tight end I can grab people kind of fading because of an injury, sort of like Lamar was a season ago, coming off back-to-back years of an injury. So there's just a lot of guys I like there. And the fact that quarterback just feels like it's deeper to me now than it ever has been before, with guys entering the frame from a rushing standpoint, guys that give you that type of utility, like Anthony Richardson goes a full round later. Kyler Murray, who I firmly believe has QB1 overall upside this season, goes in round 7. Jane Daniels in round 8. Hell, Justin Herbert's outside the top 100 picks. So I love Lamar in fantasy. I would love to get him on my team. When he does go in round 4, I'm not going to laugh at the pick by any means. I just think there's a number of other directions I want, a number of other guys I want in that range, and there's a number of other quarterbacks I'm comfortable with as my every week starter in fantasy later in the draft. Where I'm probably going to grit my teeth and pass on Lamar. Wyatt, what are your thoughts on any of that?
Patrick, I'll say, if you can guarantee me I get Kyler Murray in every draft, I'll pass on Lamar every time. Because I think Kyler Murray is like the best value there is at QB. I absolutely love Kyler Murray. I mean, I don't know what we're doing there with that one. I mean, the guy's a top five fantasy QB every time he's healthy. So, and you got Marvin Harrison now. So
yeah, you got Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride stepping into the best days of his career. Like hell yeah, it's wheels up on that offense, baby. I traded him in a dynasty league for 3 first-round picks, and I'm starting to think I may have gotten screwed on that one.
Yeah, I traded away a Kyler last year too, and I'm not happy about it.
Well, we won't talk about our bad memories here. We'll just keep the train running. We'll chug over to some sleepers here, guys that we're going to be buying low, at least somewhat low on here, and then they're gonna pan out for us and lead us to success this season. Ethan, we'll start with you, my man. Who's your sleeper in the AFC North?
I'm going to stick with the quarterback position. Not the biggest fan of this quarterback. I was never really high on Deshaun Watson as a Cleveland Brown, but I just think at his overall ADP right now, if you are punting the quarterback position, I do think he offers a ton of upside. Overall, 139, the 1207 quarterback 21. And I just think at that price point, I think he offers QB1 upside week to week or high end QB2, and you're getting him in the 12th round. So as I said, if you're punting the position, I don't mind pressing the button on Deshaun Watson. He has arguably the best supporting cast he's had in a long time, with Amari Cooper. They just traded for Jerry Jeudy and paid him. Njoku broke out last year. Elijah Moore still around. Tillman, let's see if he can take a step in his sophomore year. And you also have a decent run game. We don't know how Chubb is going to be, but I mean, Foreman's there, Ford's there. So I think this offense with Stefanski and Ken Dorsey, I do think they have a chance to do pretty good things. And it kind of all hinges on Deshaun Watson. But Deshaun Watson, it's been small sample sizes when he has been the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, just because he's always hurt. That's the biggest thing with Deshaun Watson. Can he stay on the field? He's played in 6 games each of the last 2 seasons. One due to suspension, and then this past year he just kept getting hurt, and then he finally missed the rest of the season with that shoulder injury. But just looking at those 5 games, if you throw out week 7 where he barely played, his points per game, just looking at the Fantasy Pros half point PPR scoring on their website, it was 18.34 points per game with that small sample size of 5, which landed him right around QB 13. That's removing Joe Flacco out of that, and then Anthony Richardson was tied for 12. But Patrick Mahomes last year had an average of 18.4. So he was basically right there, and you're clearly drafting Mahomes a lot sooner than Deshaun Watson. So I know yeah. So I just think at this price point with his upside, and he does have a somewhat of a rushing floor in his 2 seasons with Cleveland. He does average right around 30 rushing yards per game. That's an extra 3 points a week. And I think it's kind of now or never for Deshaun Watson. I'm sure Cleveland Browns fans feel the same. I mean, at some point, is Deshaun Watson ever going to come close to where he was in Houston? Probably not, but can he be 85? I mean, maybe 90%. Who knows? But I just think at that price point, I'm okay pressing the button.
Well, that's your quarterback, man. Tell Ethan why you agree with him.
At the possible chance of sounding like a homer here, I'm definitely in on Deshaun Watson this year. Agree with a lot of what Ethan just said, and the rushing floor is a big part of it. And he pointed out those healthy games, the actual fantasy points per game that he had. If we just get that, like, he's a win at the price. And we know that he can be more than that. And how much more at this point, we don't really know. As Ethan said, does he ever get back to Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson? I doubt it, But can he get a little bit closer to what he was with the Texans? I think he still can. I also think that Kevin Stefanski wants to be a more pass-heavy offense. I think He hasn't really been able to do that with Deshaun Watson yet. 6 games 2 years ago as he was rusty coming back to football. Last year dealing with shoulder injuries. He finally got a QB that he could do it with in Flacco at the end of the year, where he was able to just call pass play after pass play. And the passing volume won't be quite as high with Flacco just because Deshaun Watson's going to run some. Like some of those pass plays are going to turn into runs. But I mean, that's cool for Watson, right? But the reports are too out of camp is that Kevin Stefanski wants to turn the offense into a little bit more of a spread offense to try and suit Deshaun Watson even more. So I think he is trying to move into that high-paced passing offense with Watson. And if that's the case, the ceiling is very high.
Yeah, I agree. I've been in on Watson really since the day he got traded to Cleveland, so it's been a rough couple of years for me with some of those takes. But the points you guys made are the ones I've been hammering home on Watson personally. I mean, if you actually look at what he's producing when he's out there and finishing games, like it's good for fantasy. Like it just is, especially in superflex formats. I know we're not discussing that tonight, but even at one QB, he's going 139 picks deep into the draft. Like that's basically free. So if you are a believer of taking a backup quarterback, there's no one in that range who has higher upside than Deshaun Watson, who's had 3 top 5 finishes on his resume. He's only 29 years old, which is not ancient for a quarterback. So he gives you that Konami code rushing upside. I got nothing but good things to say about Deshaun Watson is on the football field this season. So that's a good sleeper, Ethan, for sure.
Yeah, just one more point too. Just with
one more point on Watson.
Just with Cleveland per se, right? Joe Flacco, everybody thought he was left for dead, and then all of a sudden he comes out, wins comeback player of the year. I mean, if he can be the quarterback 2 from weeks 13 to 17 in that offense, I mean, like I said, they added Jerry Jeudy. Why can't Deshaun Watson have that kind of upside week to week going forward? So I just think there's just so much upside in the offense and just so much upside with Deshaun Watson. Some people think Deshaun Watson's dead, but like I said, same people thought Flacco was dead, and he ended up putting on a show late last year. So it's definitely possible.
Yeah, Flacco was dead and buried until he wasn't. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Watson this year. But Wyatt, who is dead and not buried as a sleeper for you in this division this season?
My sleeper for the AFC North is Chase Brown for the Bengals running back, going 116th overall, RB38 according to Fantasy Pros ADP. And basically it's for me is that I want to bet into the variance and the unknown, the ambiguousness of that backfield because I think there's plenty of points to be scored between whoever's getting the opportunities between him and Zach Moss. I think they're both possibly values, if I'm being honest. I think they both could have a role in which we'll be happy to have drafted them. But Chase Brown last year showed off his immense athleticism, was the fastest recorded ball carrier last year, which is wild to think when we have players like Tyreek Hill out there, But he didn't get that many opportunities, which is why I think people are a little bit scared of what he could be for the Bengals. And he's a little bit on the slight side. He's a little bit smaller, not the highest draft pick, but in college, he was an absolute workhorse. He didn't show any signs of being too small for handling a large workload. I don't know how large of a workload he'll actually get for the Bengals, but I think there's realistically that he is splitting some of the carries with Zach Moss and getting the majority of the passing work for the running backs. And if that's the case, he's going to be really exciting for any leagues that reward getting pass receptions. And now we've got this quote from Zach Taylor this week where he's basically like saying that Chase Brown is looking like the guy they drafted him to be, and they've got a big future for him, basically. So I'm starting to feed in even more to it. I was already in on drafting Chase Brown, and I think that I should be even drafting even more of him at this point. And just him being highly athletic like he is, I think he has a higher theoretical ceiling than Zach Moss. Like if one of these players is going to be like a top 12 running back, I think it could be Chase Brown as opposed to Zach Moss. I think we know who Zach Moss is. Well, I'm going to take that back slightly because I think we thought we knew who Zach Moss was before he played for Indianapolis Colts, and he showed us a little bit more than he had in the past, but maybe that was a little bit the offensive line there and Anthony Richardson helping open up some holes for him. But either way, we know that Zach Moss is more of a plotter, and I don't mean that as like a derogatory term, just trying to delineate between the two of them. We know it's like Zach Moss doesn't have home run speed. He's not that kind of an athlete. He can break tackles really well, but he's the type of guy who's going to get you 5 and 10 yard gains, whereas Chase Brown could be the guy who can get you a 50-yard gain. And for that reason, I think like if one of them is going to fully break out, it's going to be Chase Brown.
Ethan, tell me what you think about the Bengals backfield and Chase Brown going in 118 overall in RB39.
I agree with Wyatt. I agree that I think Chase Brown and Zach Moss, I think both could be slept on a little bit. I mean, Zach Moss is RB25 right now, overall 83. So I think you can make a case for both, because I do think Zach Moss has a chance to beat that ranking of RB25. But Chase Brown, he has the most upside in that backfield. He has the ability to break one at any given moment with that speed. So late in the draft, 118 overall, Chase Brown could end up being a league winner for you. And those are the kind of picks late in the draft that you want to make. This backfield, we don't know what the splits are going to be, which makes it very enticing, which is probably why these ADPs are depressed a little bit. So it's going to be an interesting battle in camp. I do think Zach Moss is going to end up being the quote unquote starter, just for a lot of first and second down carries. He is good in pass pro too, but I think they're going to want to use Chase Brown on third down as a weapon out of the backfield, and still give him his if he can get 10, 12 carries a game and working on third downs, I think that's going to be a very usable piece in fantasy football, especially in full point PPR leagues.
Yeah, we started the show talking about how much we all like Chase and how much we think with a healthy Burrow coming back that this offense is going to take a step. So there's going to be opportunity, I think, for both guys, like you both mentioned, to be fantasy viable. And at cost, I think I actually would rather take a shot at Chase Brown at almost RB40 price versus Moss a little bit earlier. So good points there on both sides. I think he definitely fits the mold of a good sleeper. My sleeper from this division is actually a little bit more high profile, which is not typically something you hear when you think of a sleeper. And I almost feel a little bit dirty bringing up this guy's name as a sleeper for how good he was in the past. But I'm going with another Cleveland Brown here in the form of Nick Chubb, who goes ADP of 116, whopping RB37. So Wyatt, the Browns fan, won't hate that at all, I don't think. But I know the guy's bouncing back from a gruesome knee injury. He had another gruesome knee injury, but he's done that before. And think of everything we know about Nick Chubb here. I mean, we talked about Derrick Henry being a genetic freak. This guy is cut from the same cloth. I mean, the guy he's already in the gym squatting 540 pounds last week. I mean, I'm no doctor, but that can't be something you prescribe for a normal human being to work out to rehab from a tough knee injury. So, I'm not really sure if he's going to be on the field for week 1 or not, but I think the risk is already baked in here around round 10 or around 11. And hell, if we get news that he's not going to be ready to go for week 1, I think that ADP is just going to get a little bit even more depressed, which I'm perfectly fine with taking a stab on. I mean, I think more and more leagues today have IR spots for players that are injured. So he's a guy you can grab and stash on one of those IR spots. And that's also a good workaround if you're playing in redraft leagues that use kickers or defenses. It's a good excuse to not draft a kicker or a defense if your league has that option. So you just grab another player, stash him on IR, then add a kicker before week 1 or whatever. So that's kind of a sidebar a little bit there. But I just think that even though everyone knows who Nick Chubb is, everyone knows how good he is, I think he's priced low enough now where he actually falls into the category of a sleeper here. What do you boys think about that?
I can't speak about Nick Chubb faithfully because he's my favorite player. So like for years and years, I've always just been higher than market on Nick Chubb. I can't help it. It doesn't hurt that he is one of the best running backs there is in the NFL, when healthy, that is. But it is tough with the injury. If there's anybody who's built different, it's probably Nick Chubb. So I'll say that, that's all narrative, right? Like there's no metrics behind Nick Chubb's ability to just recover from gruesome knee injury. Because who else has done it like he has, right? Like when that injury happened in college, normally that means your career is over. Nick Chubb went on to become one of the best running backs in the NFL. Like it shouldn't surprise anybody if he does come back sooner than everyone's expecting. But I think like if you're drafting Nick Chubb, you should do it with the idea that you probably have like an RB2 for the second half of the year and everything else is bonus. Just like prepare yourself for that. And I think if that suits you, then he's a good pick.
100%, especially if you go with that hero or zero running back approach. This is a guy you want to take a shot on late, where you're filling the gap in the early going, and then backfilling the position later, so you have a good player down, hopefully, for the stretch run. Ethan, any thoughts on Chubb before we move on to our busts?
Not much to add. Nick Chubb is just a beast. He got hurt in week 2 of last year, so he's had a decent amount of time to recover, but that was a pretty gruesome knee injury. But Nick Chubb, as you guys just said, he is different, and I do agree. It's a pick that you make knowing that you might not get return till midway through the season, but he's a pick that could help you win a fantasy championship, because I mean Nick Chubb is one of the best running backs in the league when healthy.
For sure, for sure. And before we round into our bust category, I just want to take a minute, guys, talk about the sponsor of today's show. That is the Did It app. That's DIDIT. Essentially, what that is it's an app that you can use to get personalized one-on-one fantasy advice from fantasy experts like us here at Sunday Surefire. Maybe even someday like Wyatt, if he's not already on that app. But it allows you to get real access right away to an expert. You can FaceTime, have an in-depth conversation about your roster, what your needs are. Maybe if you want to bounce a trade offer off them, maybe a rookie draft pick if you're in a dynasty, whatever the case may be. It's a pay per minute cost platform, wicked easy to use. I've done it myself. They're currently set up for iOS users at the moment, but definitely give those folks a shot if you want to dominate your leagues this week. Sunday Surefire team is available. We're $1 a minute, one of the cheapest ones on the site, but we're available in both the redraft and dynasty spaces. So definitely look a little bit further into that. They're on X at Get Did It. That's GETDIDIT. And your first call is absolutely free on that platform, guys. So you have absolutely nothing to lose. With us, if you do go with us, we do provide you with notes about what we talked about going into the call, and then also what we talked about during the call, and kind of just some ideas that we have. So we really make it as pain-free as possible. So give us a shot on Did It, and you won't regret it later. But let's round into our bust category here. So we've been really warm and fuzzy on a lot of guys so far. We think this stud's awesome. We think this guy's going to outperform ADP. But let's get a little bit negative here, even though this is admittedly is a tough division to talk about busts, because Ethan and I were talking before he came on. It's a little almost like it's more like a case of I don't love this guy at his cost, but I could see it, versus I think this guy's going to be terrible at where you have to draft him here. So with that here, Wyatt, we'll kick it to you, my man. What do you got for us for quote unquote busts in the North?
Yeah, so I mean, I had to go with somebody from the Steelers, being the rival of my team.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say George Pickens is my bust. 55th overall, wide receiver 27. I get it, right? Like, no Deontay Johnson. He should have this runway for all these targets. I'm not so sure that it's that simple for George Pickens. I think George Pickens is a really talented deep threat. I'm not positive if he does more than that well in the NFL at this point. Now, he could grow into more than that, but we haven't really seen that so far. Some of that can be blamed on his offensive coordinators, because they haven't really been doing him any favors. But still, that leaves us without knowing how well he can do all the other things in the NFL. And now Arthur Smith is his offensive coordinator, who we just spent the last year bashing over and over again about how he used his players in Atlanta. His quarterback it's an upgrade, but like, we're not pumped, right? Like, he has Russell Wilson now. How long have we been bashing him now? If Justin Fields comes in, not the best passer, but we do have him providing DJ Moore with a 30% target share and helping him get to a massive fantasy finish. So I actually think like it's possible Justin Fields could be better, just because he's not quite there as a passer yet, and he's more likely to just feed his number one weapon more than anything else. Whereas Russell Wilson, I think, does a little bit of still trying to like make a play happen and work through the progressions a little bit. But anyways, with his draft slot, where you have to actually draft him, he's a player that you have to rely on week to week. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to do that in your redraft leagues. Now, if you're in a best ball league, I think George Pickens is a much better pick, because you don't have to worry about the down weeks when those happen. But if you're having to actually put him in your lineup as your likely wide receiver 2, in your weekly lineup, I'm really afraid that you're going to be disappointed too many weeks when the Steelers are throwing 24 passes in the game and Russell Wilson can't hit him, and he's just running downfield, and he gives you a dud. So I'm not drafting much George Pickens.
Ethan, I think I know where you're going to go with this, but have at it.
I agree completely. George Pickens was my bust as well. I've never been a big George Pickens guy. I do see the upside at wide receiver 27, a wide receiver 3. I get it. But where you need to draft him, as Wyatt said, I'd rather go in a different direction. Mark Andrews is after him. I'd rather take a shot at my tight end 1 there. Even a guy like T. Higgins. I mean, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd's out of there now. T. Higgins, before he got hurt last year, was wide receiver 17 and 22. Sorry, wide receiver 22 and wide receiver 17 in 2021 and 2022. And like I said, Boyd's out and Joe Burrow's back, contract year. I think I'd rather go in that direction. I think he's safer. But George Pickens, Wyatt made a great point. I just don't see the consistency. Perfect best ball candidate, but George Pickens scored 43.9% of his fantasy points in half point PPR scoring in 3 games last season. So it just boom or bust for him. Also with Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith never had wide receiver finish higher than wide receiver 35 in his 3 years in Atlanta. I think Drake London's a much better prospect than George Pickens. So I just think he has a lot of things working against him. He just needs, like what I said, he's more of a deep ball specialist. He was number 10 in deep targets last year with 26, and he was number 18 in air yards. He participated on 100%. He was at 100% route participation, so he was out there running routes. But he seemed to be just focused on the deep part of the field. I know there's reports that he's going to be working more in the slot this year, but I think at his cost, I would rather go in a different direction just because I just never been a George Pickens guy.
I'm going to steal all the drama here and just say that it's going to be a clean sweep on this one. We're going 3 for 3 here, guys. George Pickens is also my bust at 48 overall. I think the WR27 price point, like you guys said, is fine. Like I think I could see him definitely finishing WR27. Hell, I think he could even be a back end WR2. Hell, Van Jefferson is listed as this team's number 2 wide receiver. So, yes, he could return quote unquote return value here in the spot. I just want to pick other guys in the spot. Like I want other players. The same thing as Ethan said. Like I don't want to draft him and hope that I can get him to score 12, 13 touchdowns that he's going to need if he's not getting the consistent volume in other areas of the field. So I'm just not taking those risks that early in the draft. So I don't have much more to add, so I just won't. And we'll just round this thing here into dynasty stashes after the Pittsburgh Steelers have been thoroughly bashed over and over again. So let's go here. Dynasty stashes. I'll kick this one off here, guys. I'm going to go back to the Cincinnati Bengals offense. I'm going to go to Jermaine Burton, ADP 145, receiver 61 overall. I've been salivating to get my hands on Burton ever since he was drafted by the Bengals in the 3rd round. We talked about Burrow coming back healthy, how good Jamar Chase is going to be. That's all great. Higgins is still in the fold, playing on the franchise tag in 2024. But with the Bengals, obviously in win now mode, they want all those pieces in the mix for this season. But beyond that, this roster is about to start getting really, really expensive. Burrow's got a big payday. Chase is going to get the bag here. So it's going to be hard for them to keep all these skill players. And it just feels like Higgins a year from now is going to be the odd man out in this group. So in theory, that elevates Burton as early as 2025 into the number 2 receiving role on this team. So if you look at, let's take a look here. Let's get in the time machine. We'll go back, look at Joe Burrow's number 2 receiver since he arrived in Cincinnati here. So among wide receivers who played in at least 8 games since the Joe Burrow era started in 2020, the Bengals wide receiver 2 has posted the following half PPR point finishes on a per game basis here. Okay, so 2020 was Tyler Boyd, WR36. In 21, it was T. Higgins, WR12. 2022, T. Higgins, WR13. In 2023, it was T. Higgins again, WR38. That, of course, doesn't really factor in Burrow missing a big chunk of time in 2020 and 2023, but it kind of it does tell us that the second receiver slot is very valuable in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow in that era. So we know how dangerous this attack can be overall. So I think this is a guy, you're grabbing him in the 3rd round of your rookie drafts, then it's only upside here. If this guy sucks and can't play, it's totally fine that you missed on a mid 3rd round pick. It's not going to kill you at all. You're not even going to miss this pick, but I think you're getting nothing but upside here in the spot, and I can't wait to draft. But I have been drafting as many shares of Burton as I can get my hands on in Dynasty.
Yeah, Burton's a great pick, honestly. His thing is his head on straight. Because from everybody who does prospecting, watching his film says this guy's legit. This guy's got it. but he's had problems, staying out of trouble. I'll put it that way. But I do think like the runway is there for him to possibly get some work this year. He could be the third wide receiver for them, and he could walk into wide receiver 2 for them next year, which would be a fantastic place to be.
Yeah, no, we're in agreement. I think Burton's a great dynasty stash. To Wyatt's point, I mean, some people think he could have been a second round pick, maybe high second round pick if it wasn't for the off field concerns. But he was good at Alabama. I mean, he with subpar quarterback play, he was in the 90th percentile against single coverage and 82nd percentile in yards per route run. Has all the talent in the world. The Joe Burrow led offense, it can support 3 receivers if he can get that wide receiver 3 role. We've seen Tyler Boyd have his games here and there, and with Higgins potentially on the outs, as you said, Kamish, and if he can lock in that wide receiver 2 next year, it's wheels up.
Love it. Love we're singing Kumbaya, especially when it's a guy I bring up. Love that. Ethan, let's go to you, man. What do you got for us for a dynasty stash?
I'm going to stay with the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm going to go to the tight end position. I'm going to go Eric All, overall 262, tight end 36, so definitely free here. I think Eric All, he's put in a great situation with Joe Burrow on that offense. Very shallow depth chart with Mike Gesicki, Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson. Eric All, he's had some injury concerns in his college career. He was at Michigan, then transferred over to Iowa. But I mean, at 6'4", 252, unfortunately, we didn't get to see his measurables due to his ACL injury this past year. A lot of times with tight ends, I look at athleticism and opportunity. Definitely has the opportunity, and I think if you look at his advanced metrics and his tape, I do think he has the athleticism. The last 2 seasons with at least 20 targets, he was 3rd and 10th in yards per route run. He was 16th and 30th in PFF receiving grade. And before his ACL tear last year, amongst all FBS tight ends, he was 7th in reception yards and 11th in missed tackles forced. So I do think he has the talent. 4th round is not bad draft capital for a tight end, and I think he could have been drafted even higher if it wasn't for the back issues early in his career and then the ACL last year. But with that depth chart lacking a true number 1 tight end, I'm definitely not opposed to taking a free dart on Eric All.
We had Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros on here about a month ago, and he was singing Eric All's praises as well, and so was I. And it was an awesome time talking about good Eric All. I love this call for a tight end, another guy who's basically free in dynasty here. So, Wyatt, give us your take on Eric All, and then just round right into your dynasty sleeper or dynasty stash.
I think Eric All is a perfect taxi squad member. Yeah, he's like this interesting prospect because of the injury and whatnot, but he also seems to like check a lot of boxes at the same time. And he is someone where you could easily see the path of him getting that job at some point in the future. Maybe not this year, as he kind of works into the NFL. Tight ends normally start slower, right? We got a little bit spoiled last year. That's not normal. But especially, ones who aren't first round picks, you don't really expect much to happen in the first year. But I do think that like moving forward, something could happen for him because like Mike Gesicki is not that great, for being honest. And outside of that,
we know
there isn't much there.
We saw him in New England last year. He's not very good, is he, Ethan?
No, he's not.
It is always incredible when you see someone that athletic, incapable of breaking a tackle. It is so weird. Like, I'll never understand those types of players. Like, how can you be so fast and not break a tackle? I just don't get it. But I'll roll into mine, like you said, and that's Deonta Foreman, running back for the Browns. I guess I had to pick a Browns player. I didn't do it on purpose, but it did happen. Basically, what this is like, I know we talked about Nick Chubb, and we talked about how like it's fair to only really expect something in the second half of the season. And I think there's reason to believe that Deonta Foreman could be a value for the first half of the season for some teams. Maybe you're the person who has Nick Chubb in your league and you want to try and find a way to get some early season production, because while we do know that Jerome Ford should be the starting running back, we also know that last year they didn't use Ford in certain situations, and most of those situations were around the goal line, short yardage, things like that. They gave that all to Kareem Hunt. He did all of the dirty work, basically. Basically, Jerome Ford was really good in the open field when they gave him the opportunities, but he was not very good through between the tackles. So they needed someone to do that job, which is why I think they signed Deontay Foreman to be able to do that kind of dirty work for the Browns. And the Browns are a good offense. They're going to get in scoring position often. And Deontay Foreman is essentially free. Like, I mean, he might be on your waivers. You might be able to send a 4th-round rookie pick for him. You might be able to get him thrown on to a trade for essentially free, and he's someone who, if he's got like the goal line role for the Browns and he's chipping in a few carries every game, maybe a target or two, probably not too many targets because that's not really does. But if he's, getting 8 to 10 carries and he has that short yardage role, he could be worthwhile enough that he matters. And really, the point I want to do with Deontay Foreman is once you have that, try to move it for anything, because you should be able to upgrade that. Whatever you spent on him, you should be able to upgrade that to somebody who's hurting for some early season production. And if you can't, well, you have someone who you can use in the flex in a pinch, and you got them for free.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, he's not someone I think of traditionally as a dynasty stash, because obviously he's an older guy, been around the league. I think it was an Achilles he had to start his career.
Yeah, he was the first dude to like buck the trend.
Yeah,
coming back from the Achilles.
No, it's an interesting point. I think it's in dynasty. What you ended with there is a really good point, where he's free. You can probably pick him up on waivers, then you can flip him for something in season. I actually did that with him in a league that Ethan and I play. I grabbed him off waivers and ended up trading him for a pick that ended up being the 301 in a draft. And it's just kind of like those easy moves where, like, you got a guy, and so, if you need him, he has a good game. Even if you didn't start him, like, now maybe someone else sees it and says, "Ooh, give me that. I want to give you whatever, 3rd-round pick for him. That's fine." But he also is a guy that, like, he's a capable NFL body. And while he's not sexy, he's never going to get you like a 1st-round pick in return. I think it doesn't take a whole hell of a lot for him to become viable. That's the running back position in general here. So actually, I thought it was kind of an odd call out here, but the more we workshop it, the more I actually kind of like it, Wyatt. So good call there. Ethan, close us out here. Give us your thoughts on the ageless wonder and Deontay Foreman.
No, yeah, definitely an interesting call out, but I definitely like the process there. Whenever you can pick up players for free and flip them for quick value, it's always a good process. I don't really know why teams just let Foreman just keep leaving him. He's a good, capable back, like we just talked about. He's great in the goal line. He did a very good job for Chicago last year, but apparently nobody wants to keep him around. But what I project to be a good offense in Cleveland, if he does get that short yardage role. And who knows what's going to happen with Nick Chubb? I mean, he could be a nice free piece. That, why I said, throw in your flex or flip for some value.
Love it. Good calls there, boys. Good calls. That was fun. Fun episode to run down the AFC North here. It was really fun having Wyatt on board here. Wyatt, any closing thoughts for us here before we depart?
Just appreciate you having me here, and I hope everybody out there is subscribing to Sunday Surefire.
Well, we certainly hope so too. And then obviously make sure you're subscribing to Wyatt. Again, he's on X at WyattB_FF and on YouTube at JWB Fantasy Football. Wyatt, great time having you on here, brother. And until next time, folks, peace.